agenda. We're by the way, we're live already. But yeah,
Oh,
we're just gonna
awesome.
shoot the breeze. Um, Thanks again, and happy Friday afternoon. Usually by now I mean, it is. I think it's Shabbat in Israel now. I don't even know.
Yep.
But Nina is actually in New York. My name is Ariel Serber. I've been doing these Secure the Bag talks and other content and bringing on really good professionals. And hopefully, we all gain a little bit of knowledge, practical, useful, and insights to plug into our day to day. This specifically will be geared more for startups, but it's really, there's going to be things that are applicable across the board, I would say. And so, you could be anywhere in the world, as they say, but you're here with us. So thank you for that. And Nina can as well. Nina, if you want to give a little bit of your background, backstory, and we'll get into the conversation. Thanks again.
For sure. Awesome. Well, thanks, Ariel, for having me on. And I'm not sure, are we going to be able to see people who are on, like in the audience, or how will it work?
No,
Okay. So
no.
hello to anyone who's
By the
watching.
way, someone just said hi, Nina, but I don't even know who that is because all I see is LinkedIn user, which is strange, but
Got it.
whatever.
Okay. Okay.
So
So
yeah, so we can go between just, fireside chat style, like a little more formal to totally informal, like however it kind of rolls, like it's fine by me. As long as again, as long as we get into like what you're doing, what your mission is, how you help and support these startups, especially right now, and we'll get into it. But why don't you give your background and who you are and what you're working on.
for sure. So hello, everyone. So I'm Nina. A little bit of background. I'm originally from Chicago. I lived in New York for some time and actually moved to Israel about 2 years ago. I started Line Run Consulting, which is my company today. It's been almost 5 years now. Crazy how time flies. And we have a team that's half in Israel, half in the US. And our primary focus is working with founders, usually anywhere from early stage startups all the way to scale ups and publicly traded companies, and even investment funds to prepare them to fundraise and do all the preparation work that usually is the headache for on the founder's end, and for us to do the heavy lifting when it comes to fundraising. So then you as the founder can focus on your business, and then we can put you in the best position so you can be successful in your fundraise process. We've worked with a bit over 300 companies to date that have raised over $650 million. So we really,
Wow.
we know it works. We're in the ecosystem. Thank God I have an amazing team that has just tremendously, has done tremendous work with our clients as well. And yeah, I've pretty much just built the brand to date, and I'm happy to share more insights and whatnot.
Okay.
We see a lot. We see everything across the board. So you name
Okay.
it.
We can go there. But I want to start from the beginning. So again, because you are a young business owner, entrepreneur, what got you started in the first place? Like, how did you discover that this was a problem that startups were having? And how did you decide, okay, so this is how I'm going to fix it? Because you didn't just start right out of school. You basically started very early in your career doing this.
Yeah. So there were a few things actually for context, and I'm going to age myself a little bit, but I actually did start my company when I was in college, which is pretty
Right.
crazy because people are like, well, how can you advise companies on raising millions of dollars when you were just in college? You were 18, 19 years old, which
Yeah.
is a crazy question. It's a crazy thing, but it worked and I did it. And it was a lot of work. And at the initial stages, like proving myself. But at
Sure.
this point, it kind of speaks for itself. But um, at the initial phases of when I like identified this issue. So for context, if anyone's familiar with the organization Tamid, it's an organization on college campuses that allows students to work with startup companies based in Israel. And I started the chapter at Illinois at my university, and
Mhm.
part of that you have to source projects for the students. So we were growing by the time I like I was like about 2 years into it. We had about 80 students in the chapter, and so I had to source the project. So like naturally, what I was doing on a day to day was like connecting with founders, reaching out, putting myself out there, and being like, "Hey, I have these students that are really smart in the U.S. I can help you with X, Y, and Z." And so that's how I kind of got my niche, or like how I started seeing the problem, and that's specifically like on the Israeli founder side. But I think regardless if you're an Israeli founder or if you're in the U.S., like the problems were still the same. And then when I realized, I was like, look, I can kind of do this myself. And I met a few people who became very strong, like mentors of mine, and really kind of helped the early stages. And who I worked with on my first, let's say 50 clients at the beginning, which I can kind of tell the story about, but because it's kind of funny how it happened. But that's how I kind of saw the problem. And the problem really was usually there were a few things. One, I think a lot of times when you have a startup and you're fundraising, the founders are either getting one of two types of assistance when it comes to building out like all the materials and the preparation and to put together everything for their data room. And either they put together, let's say, a deck or whatever, and then they work with like a designer that can make it look good, or they're working with someone who's like more kind of investment banking type of background that like knows the financials, but doesn't know how to actually tell the story and make it compelling in a way that's like relatable. So I saw like these two aspects, in which like that was my background. Like I had both the finance background and the more like marketing creative background. And I was like, why isn't there a bridge between the kind of like the two, and which then helps, the founder throughout to do all the materials that they need and all the preparation, not just the financials, not just the deck, not just the verbal pitch. And so when people ask like, well, what is Lion Run? I kind of make a joke and I'm like, well, it's kind of think about if like an investment bank and a marketing agency had a baby. And then there was also no one servicing like founders, like earlier stage founders. If you go to an investment bank to help, like those are usually for larger raises, like large Series A, large Series B.
Further on.
Yeah. So there's just kind of like this niche that was untapped. So yeah, that's just high level.
So you mentioned a few things there that I want to get into. So one is, I'll say the two things so that in case I forget, it's out there. Data rooms, because that's sort of the like, I guess more meat and potatoes, and then the storytelling is what gets someone it's the attraction and the compelling hook, or what makes it more a compelling reason for an investor to actually get involved, either right then and there or to at least take a second meeting, because sometimes the goal isn't necessarily to get someone to write a check, but it's just to get people to hear more, listen more, because maybe they're not the right investor, but maybe they'll know someone who is. But you have to be able to tell your story. So maybe let's start with that. How are you helping people to tell their story? What's missing with a lot of these founders, and what can they do better? Just kind of right away.
You want to start like on the storytelling aspect?
Storytelling, yes.
Yeah. So what we see a lot with founders, there's again a few things. One, we call it like the founder investor communication dilemma. So what a founder usually is like you're embedded in the industry. You have probably experienced this problem. You're probably also technical, so you understand the nuances of your technology, and you're obviously very, very passionate about what you're doing. And what happens is like the information that like a founder might think might be relevant for an investor is not actually what would be relevant for the investor to know or understand. And then that's what creates kind of like this confusion, or what makes, a pitch less memorable, or, you kind of just lose the investor. And so what happens is the founder usually is like, ends up focusing way too much on the how and not necessarily the what or the value or the impact. And at the end of the day, like the how it works, the nuances of the technology and things like that, like it's important. Like that will come later. You know, if the investor is
Sure.
actually interested in what they're doing, they'll want to know how, like, you know, the actual background of how the technology works. But when you only have a very short amount of time to grab someone's attention, you need to make sure that like what you're conveying really hits home, like it hits personal. They can feel the problem, they can feel the urgency, and they know what, like, what's the impact that this can make, either on
Right.
themselves, or maybe they experience a problem, or on society, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
um, and so yeah, like it's really like being able to decipher between the what versus the how, and then knowing what information to be able to convey at what point.
Yeah. And I think they probably also, because they're so into the how and the actual technology, the reason that they actually started to to do a business in this sector or in this field, and it could be, if it's health, a lot of times it's because someone in their family had a specific illness or a problem with accessing care, or whatever it could be. Do you try to tell them to get into their personal story like that?
Yeah, I can at the like more at the beginning of the pitch, because that's like
Yeah.
kind of like the founder problem fit. If the if
Hmm.
the, if the founder has experienced a problem personally, then they'll find a solution regardless. The solution might change and pivot over time. But if their mission is to solve this problem because it's something that they've experienced, then I think, you know, that storytelling aspect and that personal anecdote does go far. But that would be, I would say, like, you know, if you're like pitching, like that's usually something that would go at the beginning to set the tone, set the scene. And
Yeah.
um, especially at the early stage, because investors at the early stage are, out of anything, they're looking more at like who the founder is than anything, because
Okay.
everything else could change. So they want to make sure, like, hey, is this the right person to execute to solve this problem?
Right, right. And things, look, as you know, things are changing rapidly. We're talking, and it could be anything. It's geopolitics, economics, finances, even technology itself with AI developing so quickly. It's less and less about, I think, the technology, more about the person and the story. And are there any formulas or frameworks that you like to implement or that people should think about, um, for how to communicate clearly, concisely, um, what it is they do, the problem that's out there, who do they solve it for, that kind of.
Yeah. So I would say the first, if you want to talk about it in the context of, let's say, a pitch deck, like the first four
Sure.
slides is what we call the core. That's like the through
Okay.
line of the message, and everything else usually comes after that pretty seamlessly. Like you can place it in, it doesn't really matter the order as much. But you have to get the first four slides really, really sharp and really, really like concise. And what that is usually it's the problem, solution, the how it works. Which again, it's more of not how it works in terms of technology, but it's more of like, um, what's the experience from whoever the end stakeholder is, and then the value, the unique value proposition. So the way we like break it up, and then you also usually we put in like a introductory kind of slide, or something that will help set that tone, like a personal anecdote or quote or
Hmm.
something. Um, so that, and I can, if you want, I can kind of break those down. But
Yeah, let's break it down.
so
I like getting granular and because
yeah,
I want people to have takeaways and then, um, gain a lot from it. And then obviously, if and when they're ready and at the stage to engage with a professional like yourself, then let's do it.
yeah. So usually, you know, you set the tone with uh, kind of just a general statement, like a true fact or something like that can relate to personal anecdote, a quote, statistic. again, that's where the more of the storytelling aspect will come in. Then you get into the problem. And for the problem, a lot of times what we see is that like founders will get too like they're solving many problems. So they get really excited and they're like, we're doing this, this, and this, and this. Like, and what we say is like you want to be able to find the most impactful problem that you might be solving. That's like the highest quantifiable problem. And also like the problem that like the audience or the stakeholder that you're speaking to could relate to most. And I can give you an example in a minute because we actually had a client this past week who we had this conversation with. But then you have the solution, which is like that clear one-liner of like X solves Y through Z. Like you can, that I know that's a bit like high level, but like essentially just show it like this is what you're doing.
Like a car solves mobility for people. Like that's
a car solves mobility for people through their whatever technology or something like that.
To get from A to B. Like that's it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of algebra, it sounds like, but it's actually not. When you actually just...
And then you have the how it works, which you want to, again, this is usually not the nitty gritty of the technology, of how the technology functions. It's usually what the end stakeholder, like end customer, their experience. So what is it?
Right.
Like,
it's maybe how they view the actual product in their home or office.
Exactly. And that you want to break up into like 3, no more than 5 kind of clear steps. And then the unique value proposition is also where like sometimes people will get too much into the unique value proposition in the solution, and then it overwhelms the solution. So that's why we keep.
So can you say more about that? Like how do you separate that out?
So for example, like let's say your platform like increases margin and cuts costs for, let's say, whatever a company by whatever your technology is. Sometimes they'll take those like value propositions and put that in the solution, but like, and then it overwhelms the solution. But that's not, and then people are like, oh, but you do that, but what is it? I don't understand. Like, so what are you actually doing? You know what you know what I mean? So then it's better to have that separate. So you define what it is first, and then you explain like, why is this valuable? Why should you? It's more of like a why should you care?
Yeah, got it.
Why do the customers care? Or the impact of the customers.
And what about the mindset of when you go into a presentation? What do you think should be on the minds of the founders or presenters? It's usually the founders at the early stage because they're 1 or 2 or maybe 3, and that's it. What should the goal that they're trying to accomplish be, or how should they decide on what the goals should be?
Are you asking like what? Like
what should their desired outcome be, or how should they think about what they're, because you don't go into a meeting just be like, okay, we're just presenting. You have to have some kind of a call to action, or this would be a next step. You're not expecting necessarily a decision right then and there, but you have to at least set the stage for whatever comes next.
For sure. So which then gets in kind of like into the data room aspect. So what's a big thing that we actually also see is like founders don't necessarily, there's a misconception of like how the actual process, the fundraising process functions and how these funds function on the back end. And what happens is a lot of times the founders will kind of shoot themselves in the foot because they don't actually know what goes on behind the scenes at these funds and how they're dealing with it.
Let's talk behind the scenes.
Yeah. So to give you for any, I guess, founders listening, the way the process would work, and for you to like understand, like literally from start to finish. Let's say, you find an investor through LinkedIn or a mutual connection, and someone makes an introduction. You have the general email, the investment email that gives like the key highlights, and usually, let's say, a 1-pager. let's say they want to have a meeting. Okay, great. You have a 30-minute Zoom meeting, in which that sometimes before that meeting they'll ask for a deck. I've heard both. Some founders or some investors will say they won't take the meeting without that follow-on deck before. Some will say they don't really care because they might not look at it, even have a chance before. But you want to have like a deck that's not like the full, like everything. It's like a teaser, like let's say no more than 10 slides. Then you get into the meeting. You probably have 30 minutes. You don't want to you want to keep the pitch like no more between than like 5 to 8 minutes to give room for Q&A. And that's when you'll use the teaser deck that you sent previously to present. It really should be a conversation. Like the sometimes they might not even want the deck on, like some depends, like some investors might not even require for the deck, but you should always have it for that meeting to use as like to complement your narration. So the teaser deck is a lot more visual, less content heavy, because you're going to be telling the story. They're more focused on who you are than what the deck looks like.
It's more like it sounds more like an actual job interview, because that's essentially kind of, if you think about it, and I think I've never thought about it this way until just now, but they're essentially hiring you with their money to go out and create a result.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they and I've spoken to a lot of investors about this, and like they'll pressure test the founder. They'll ask certain questions to understand their thinking. That's why the Q&A and having more like appendix slides ready to address the commonly asked questions is actually sometimes more important, because then it shows you already thought ahead of like what you think they're going to be asking about. So
right, you shouldn't be surprised. If you're surprised by a question, that's a lot. That shows also a lack of preparation on your end. And then even if your product could cure cancer, I mean, who knows? But let's say it's less important than that. You know, there's just going to be someone else that's more prepared that they can also choose to invest in.
Yeah, and the reality is, I mean, these guys are seeing dozens of deals a day, a week. So if it doesn't align, then it doesn't align. But that doesn't mean
and everyone has their deal breaker.
Yeah, like there's always stuff that could come up. But so this is where kind of I think we see a lot of founders kind of fall at the last yard, before the touchdown, is like, okay, you have a great meeting, and then the investor, what happens next is that like you might have a call. That meeting might be with like the partner of the firm, but usually there's an investment committee or associates or analysts that are actually evaluating the deal, who weren't on the initial call, who didn't meet you. So what that partner might say is, okay, amazing, so send me the full deck, send me it's called the reader deck, and then they'll decide if they want to get access to the data room. But the reader deck is really important because that's what they're going to show internally, and then decide if they want to get access to the data room. So that deck needs to be able to tell your story and stand alone without you in the room.
Oh, okay. Then that's like a powerful, again, I think I've been thinking a lot about mindset. So having that mindset of if I'm not there, how can I have almost a replica of me? You have to think of the deck as your, I was going to use a Hebrew word, but I'm just going to use a Hebrew word, a shaliach, your messenger. But shaliach is a little stronger. Randy, thanks for asking this question, Randy. What are the best agile funding strategies for 2026?
I'm not sure what that's referring to.
Yeah, can you say more about what that means, agile? Because that could have a few different meanings. At least that's my thinking, or maybe that's like a offline question. But let's get into the data room.
Yeah, so that leads directly into the data room. And I actually did a interview with a friend of mine who's an investor at a pretty well-known fund in Israel, and he said an amazing line that now I use all the time because I loved how he explained it.
Okay.
And he said that the data room should essentially be that undeniable stack of evidence that you're providing to the investors of why they should invest in you. So when you're building the data room, and I'll explain what a data room is in a minute for, I guess, anyone who
Sure.
doesn't know. When you're building the data room, you're trying to build that undeniable stack of evidence. Because when an investor is trying to evaluate your company and evaluate your deal, they look at it kind of as like this ball of risk, and they need to essentially peel back each layer of risk to say,
Okay.
okay, a good investment opportunity. Is this going to
Yeah.
10x, or is this going to hit the their returns that they need for that? It would make sense for their fund.
Right.
So the data room.
I like that analogy, brother, that visualization in your mind.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. It's like I think I mean I present it a lot, but like it's like it's like your company is like an onion, and there's
Yeah.
lots of layers to an onion. So
Yeah.
what you have to do is peel back each layer of risk in order for the investor to see the opportunity, which is like the
Mhm.
core. So
Right.
essentially,
And you don't want them just crying the whole time.
yeah, you don't want that.
You don't want that.
No,
All right.
no. Um, so that's kind of how you should think about it. Like your data room is that undeniable stack of evidence. It's there to speak for you when it's supposed to represent your company, speak for you when you're not in the room. And it's important that like the analysts or associates at a lot of these VC funds, they're again seeing dozens of
Fun.
deals. So
Yeah.
if they ask you for something that's not in your data room, like you better be ready to send it to them and then like within 24 hours, 48 hours after that.
Yeah.
And if you and so what you want to do is almost like give all the information, hand the analysts or associates at that firm everything they might need proactively in the
Yeah.
data room versus reactively if they ask for it and then you don't have it. So you want to think about, okay, what are all the things that like I think that like they might ask about, um, and I actually like spoke on an investor panel about 2 weeks ago, and one of the investors on the panel said that she said she'll never decline more information. Like when a founder asks, like, "Oh, should I include this? Should I include that?" She's like, "I'll never decline more information." So you can always provide more, but like if you don't have like the key things that I need, like
Right.
the foundation, then then it becomes more.
Right. If you don't have the foundation, how are you building on it? Like
Yeah.
you can't build on sand. I don't know. Is that true? Is that accurate? Probably. Um, so, Asaf Shalev, thank you for, first of all, thank you for joining and thank you for asking this question. And he actually points to something I also want to discuss, which is keeping investors updated just on progress, whether they invest in you or not. This is something I've been talking to some people about. But he asks, I talked to a few investors last week. Two of them showed deep interest. One of them, it's likely too early. I have an update. A patent got a positive review with very aggressive claim. How long should I wait until a follow-up? And how do I do it without looking desperate? I think that desperate has a lot of weight, carrying a lot of weight there, Asaf. And that's understandable, especially to the one that is too early, who I want to ask, when is the right time to approach and what do I need? So that's, there's a
Yeah.
lot there. If you want to take a piece of it or take the whole of it, how do you keep people posted and keep people in a process? Is it sometimes not getting not no, we're all updating all the time because nothing is a finished product ever. Even Apple and Amazon is on day one. That's their whole thing. So um, is part of how I read that question is, how do you continue, because it's not a no. If you don't get a no, then you have
100%.
a certain a right, maybe that's not the right word, but you have the entree to keep someone in the loop on what's going on. So maybe what's the best way to do that without being desperate?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things that you could do. Um, I think one, like you should, regardless, you should have a like an email list of all the investors that you're speaking to, and you can send monthly or quarterly updates.
Yeah.
And again, it's not from a place of desperation. You don't have to say, "Hey, this is we just had this update. What do you think now?" Like, it's just like, "Hey,
You ready to sign?
yeah, I just want to keep you updated. We just had this. Wanted you to stay in the loop as we progress, so you're a part of the journey. I'm looking forward to staying in touch." It's really
Perfect.
that simple. Like it's not like there doesn't need to be a call to act. There doesn't need to be a specific call to action if you just spoke to him last week and he said it's too early. Um,
Right.
it's just like, hey, just we had this awesome conversation with this customer, or um, we just got this approval, this pilot approved, whatever it might be.
Hmm.
Wanted to keep you in the loop. That's it. Or you can also do it quarterly. Um,
Yeah.
so you can have different cadences for kind of different categories of types of investors you spoke to. 100%. And also, I know many investors who have invested as a result of good follow up from a
Okay.
founder who originally they said no, or they said it's too early, and then they
Yeah.
just kept following up every quarter, or they came in for like at a future round. So it happens
Hmm.
all the time.
Right.
Another,
Don't burn bridges.
yeah, there's no need to really. Another way, which some people have different comfort levels with this, is the idea of building in public. Like post on LinkedIn all the time, connect with, like, make sure whoever you're speaking to, you're connected with them, and post your updates on LinkedIn, and they're probably going to see it. And that's how you build that kind of like
Right.
that FOMO without,
Right.
you're not desperate, you're just documenting your
Yeah.
process. And then they end up, usually they might, if they're actually interested, they'll come to you.
Yeah. Essentially, you're documenting everything
Yeah,
in one way or another.
exactly. Um, but I do think like, right, like kind of like the idea of building in public, I've seen it work so much with so many founders, um, and the impact of it is crazy. And people, founders will say, "Well, my customers aren't on LinkedIn." Yeah, but investors might be, or the cousin or brother of your customer might be, or
Sure.
you know what I mean. Like, so I still think, again, if your goal is to raise at some point, LinkedIn is
Yeah.
still the best
And
route.
also, even if the end customer is not, you know, their employer, or I mean, if you're B2B, whatever, someone in that decision, the CFO, the CTO, HR, whoever, whatever division you're kind of trying to get to. And once they hear from you, they're going to Google you and they're going to find your documentation, whether it's LinkedIn or other places. They're going to find you. You may as well put your best foot forward. That's how I kind of view it. Do you think there's a difference between the Israeli mindset versus the American mindset when it comes to this kind of stuff?
Um, like which aspect when it comes to?
Just putting yourself out there and all that kind of stuff.
Um, yeah, I think actually it's interesting. On the investor panel that I spoke at a few weeks ago, I'll actually shout her out, Leah Cromwell. She's one of the partners at Upwest, and
Okay.
she like had an amazing anecdote, and she was saying how like, as Americans, you grow up, you go to school, and like the first thing like one of the first kind of assignments that you usually get is like show and tell, where you bring in,
Mhm.
a teddy bear, you bring in something that means a lot to you, and you talk to the class, and you're like, hey, you know, this is so and so. This is my teddy bear. Like, like
Okay.
you, like as Americans, we're like it's ingrained in our education system to
Mhm.
like storytelling. It's really ingrained in that. Versus like Israelis don't necessarily have that. Uh,
Right.
and it's different. So I think like Israelis are usually a bit more. They're very technical, and because usually that comes from their
Yeah.
experience usually in the army, and it's less.
Sure. And growing up and everything else, there's different culture.
They're a lot more like I'll say the word tachlis and to the point and direct,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's
So
less.
that you're getting into my future questions, but I'm glad you
Yeah.
said it. You said it organically, and I think it's so important. But yeah, go ahead. What does tachlis mean for those who don't know?
So tachlis is like to the point. Like you can use tachlis in a lot of different type of
Sure.
sentences. Like okay, you can say like, "What's a tachlis?" Like, okay, tell me, like,
Bottom line.
bottom line. What do you? Yeah, what do you want?
And I think there's like a spectrum too. There's like tachlis, or there's like tachlis. Like it's sort of like you can tell by the tone
Yeah,
sometimes.
it can be like more harsh sometimes, or it can be like just tachlis. Like, tell me what you want, or what are you
Right.
thinking? Get to the point. Um, bottom
As
line.
opposed
Yeah,
to a meandering story about your teddy bear and how your grandmother was here, and you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and I think, and so actually, one thing that like Leah mentioned was like when she was saying how a lot of the Israeli founders, because she's in the Israeli office of UpWest, so she's always meeting with Israeli founders, but UpWest is a U.S. fund, and she was saying how like some of the other partners weren't necessarily used to um, like how tactless a lot of the Israeli founders were, because they were expecting like the U.S. founders who are like U.S. founders are like very animated and storytelling and things like that, and so
Okay.
they kind of like have to, let's say you talk to a US founder in the US, they kind of have to subtract like 25% of what they're saying to like get to like what they're actually saying.
Okay.
Uh, without like, and versus an Israeli founder is like, they don't really show that much emotion. They're kind of just
Yeah.
straight to the point. And so then she was saying how like the other partners were like, is something wrong? Like they were almost like, oh, is something wrong? Like, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Um, so again, it's just you almost have to, for like the Israeli founders, you have to like add on
Add.
the 25%. Yeah. But anyway, shout out to Leah for those insights. They were great.
Oh,
Those anecdotes.
no, I think that's important. I think it has to do with also your incentives along the way. And because, like you said, everyone goes to the army, you can't add 25%. If like things need to be done, things need to be done, and that's how it's going to be. So yeah, that mindset comes through then into the business world. Um, Adi asks, "Hi, thank you for the wonderful insights." Thank you, Adi. I'm sure most of them are Nina's. How can I, as a first timer, approach questions for which I have no answer? So I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily accept the premise of the question, but be that as it may. But then there is an example. For example, questions regarding the cost of my competitor's solution compared to mine. They may not always have that information. So um, I would say, and excuse my language here, but just don't bullshit. Like, don't bullshit.
Yeah.
Nina, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Like if you don't know, it's better to say, "Hey, I don't know. I'm going to do my best to try to get that information and get back to you."
Yeah,
The last thing you want to do is fabricate numbers or something like that, because most of the time they'll find out.
right.
Um, so it's okay. Like it shows, and you can acknowledge, like, "Hey, I'm going to try to find this information. This isn't public information." Um,
Sure.
and you can acknowledge that, and I think people understand. So it's a lot better to be
Yeah.
straightforward.
And you can make educated guesses, but if you're doing that, again, I think disclosure and be transparent about that. And also I would say, and this comes from, I guess, my sales background, financial services sales. Don't don't try to get a deal by talking crap about a different company. Don't say, oh, they're a terrible company. First of all, you don't know that investor or that person you're talking to may have, you know, especially in Israel now, uh, a close friend or someone's, it's a very small world. They may know someone at that competitor, um, but they're still listening to people in the space or similar companies. You just don't know necessarily everything about the people you're talking to. So if you talk down a competitor in such a negative way, that's think about how that reflects on you before
Yeah.
you say something like that. Nina, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I also think a lot of those questions stem from a place of the investor just wants to understand how you think through things.
Hmm.
Or they're probing for another, like for example, if they're asking you, how does your competitor chart, like what's their price point relative to what you're doing, and that's not public information, which I see a lot with like more like cyber companies or like deep tech companies. A lot of that stuff is not necessarily public, or defense. So um, what they're probably asking you is like, well, what process did you go through to understand to determine how much you're charging for your product or so, like so. um and so if you don't have the data of, like, let's say the competitor, there must be some other reasoning or rationale that you're using to come to the conclusion of, like, let's say how much you would be charging for your product. So they want to, it's
Okay.
more just understanding your thought process, and what went into that versus
Yeah.
getting an exact answer.
No, that's cool. Oh, and I was just thinking, Asaf, Adi, if you're still there, I see Asaf. You just, first of all, I appreciate that. Appreciate your thanking us. You're welcome. But if you want to just drop your company information in the links so we can take a look, follow up with you about it, and you never know. Again, you never know, and we're all building in public. That's why we're doing this. We're all just, you know here on this planet going around the sun. So I think the goal of this is to help each other out and support each other. So here we are. It's already 40 minutes in, and we only really got to a few of the things we wanted to get to. But I wanted to mention one of your. I don't know if you posted it on LinkedIn. You post a lot on Instagram, which is cool. You posted about money being a tool. Can you speak to that and how that mindset impacts how founders go about their work and their uh, growing their business?
Yep, sure. So when I speak to a founder, usually one of the first things I ask is, why are you fundraising?
Mm,
And the reason why is because sometimes they don't have like a clear answer, and they're raising, just because they think that it's the would be the next move for their company, but they don't have any clear cut milestones in which they would be using that funding to be able to get. And the whole point of fundraising is to get some sort of insertion of capital to hit a milestone or break through some sort of glass ceiling that you wouldn't be able to do without the capital. And the whole
mhm.
point is to then de-risk the business for a future raise, because investors, where they're going to be making the money is when the valuation then increases and you raise again. That's usually,
Yeah,
let's say you initially raise at like 5 million valuation, and then the next round you're raising at like a $50 million valuation. Like, that's already a 10.
knock on wood.
Yeah, yeah. Please God. So the whole point is, like, they want to see, are you going to be able to hit specific milestones that then when you get to the next round, you're going to be able to raise at a much higher valuation.
Yeah,
Um, so that relates to the idea of, like, when you're raising, the raising is not the goal. Like, it's not like, yes, you might see like a lot of press releases and stuff on LinkedIn of like a company that came out of stealth that raised 100 million, whatever. Like,
yeah,
and it's not the goal, because now, like, actually that's where the work is actually going to start. And
right. You have to validate.
exactly. So raising is the money that you're getting is, you should view it as a tool to hit specific milestones, not as the goal. Like, raising is not necessarily growth. raising is the tool to then
Right.
grow. So that's
Right.
kind of what I meant by that LinkedIn post.
Yeah, no, that's great stuff. Um, where else, speaking of that, where else can people find you and follow along and sort of engage with the work you're doing?
Yeah, so I mean, most of our content I would say is mostly on LinkedIn. We also post like on Instagram, YouTube. Um, we have a monthly newsletter called the Lion Lookout, where every month we post a bunch of insights. Usually, it's insights stemmed from interviews that we do with different investors. So it's a mix of like video content with investor interviews and like different like
Mhm.
takeaways. Um, and yeah, I think you can. I'm pretty like out there in terms of um, being interactive with
Yeah,
anyone who DMs me or whatnot. So
yeah.
um, yeah.
And also, and I know you're doing, so you're based in Israel, right? I guess it's already nighttime in Israel, but where we are, we're both in New York now. It's the early afternoon. Um, can you tell us about maybe why you've been traveling, how travel was this past couple weeks? Because obviously everything is, um, has changed, and what you're here in New York for, and what's happening next week.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, so I'm based in Israel now. I made Aliyah about 2 years ago. Used to live in New York and just flew back to New York after a long journey through Egypt. If anyone's
Oh my
interested in
God.
how that works, happy to share more. Was a long few days, but made it back, and um, we are hosting an event next week, March 17th in the city midtown area, and the whole with an amazing investor panel. We
Mhm.
have two VCs, Moshe Bellows from Maccabee Ventures, Albina from 97212, and then we
Mhm.
also have the CIO for Michael Dell's family office, which I'm really excited. Lisa Mall, she's amazing. She's coming, and
That's awesome.
we spent speaking, and then we also have Pillsbury, the firm that we're hosting the event at. One of
That's a
their
law firm.
Yeah, it's a law firm. One of their VC attorneys is going to be joining and talking more about like on the legal side. The whole
Huh.
point of the event is like from seed to sale. So like what you should, what founders should expect at each stage of the every stage of their company's growth throughout the fundraising process, and how that changes, expectations, things like that, all the way until God willing you exit your company.
Right.
Um, Pretty much how to set yourself up for like that longevity, like that long-term success, and thinking ahead. So
Yeah.
I came in
Yeah.
all the way in Israel for that, so very excited.
Yeah. You can't wait. You actually came just for that event? No way.
Maybe not just for that event, but
Okay. You're
a
doing
big,
other things.
a
Okay,
big,
good.
uh, a big factor
Big
was
part.
yeah,
Okay. And where are you for Shabbat?
on the Upper East Side.
All right. Enjoy.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
Shabbat. So, how can people here help support your work?
I think
Is there anything specific you're looking for, or a challenge you're overcoming?
Um, I think, for anyone who, sees our content or any founders or even VCs, like, I mean, VCs are like usually are actually also our client because they raise from LPs. Feel free to contact me. My email is on my LinkedIn. You can book a call on my LinkedIn. Our website, lionrunconsulting.com. We have a bunch of cool stuff on our website, like our portfolio and videos from our clients. Um, and actually, it's interesting. I'll actually touch on this. We more recently, I would say, in the past year, we've actually been working very closely with a lot of corporate advisory firms and like boutique investment banks for like
Hmm.
some later stage raises. So because a lot of times for them, those boutique firms, they don't, they want to focus on the raise. They don't want to do all the heavy lifting, or they don't have the internal capabilities to do, everything. So, like we work very closely with them, and we've been doing that. We've had some very good success over the last year, working in partnership with a lot of advisory firms and boutique banks. So it's all about, again, everything that we're doing is very focused on, like, making sure that your company or your client, who's the company, is best represented for the race.
Okay, no, that's a great summary. If there's anyone that you could have this conversation with, or maybe have on a panel like next week, from now or from history, who would you want to have this a talk with?
Oh, that's a hard one. Like, if I could just choose anyone.
Yeah.
This is actually funny. It's not necessarily like VC or like fundraising related.
That's fine.
But I absolutely love Alex Hormozi's content. Fun fact.
Really? Okay.
I know some people like it, some people don't. I absolutely love his content. It's not necessarily like fundraising focus. His content is more like business building, which I think can be it's applicable really to anything.
Sure.
So if I could have a sit down chat with Alex Hormozi, I would love that.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to your mindset about where you are in your business, which is obviously, we don't have much time to talk about that, but it seems like it's going, speaking of seed to sale. I almost said seed to scale, which is kind of similar. But it sounds like something because everything is an evolution. So it starts in one point, which solves like a core pain problem. And actually saw one of the people I would mention, which is, I don't know if you know Nir Eyal, if you know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote Hooked and a couple of the books. He wrote a new book, and so I met him at a book launch event. And in Hooked, he talks about, are you a painkiller or are you a vitamin? So I think where people kind of go a little bit astray is they just throw in all the vitamin type features they have, as opposed to focusing just on when someone is starting out, it's what is the core painkiller that you provide to a specific findable, achievable marketplace. So that's how I kind of view it. And that's really it. Any last thoughts, Nina, before we go and wrap up?
I mean, I think we really like touched on a lot. I think for any founders that like are kind of struggling with this, like, I mean, you're not alone. Like, it's funny, like it's actually funny to talk about on the business side for me, but like when you kind of found like product market fit is like
Sure.
when every customer comes to you and they like, let's say you have a discovery call, and like they have the exact same pain point every time. So we see, like, I see that like I probably talk to like at least 15 founders a week, and they all usually say like it's relatively the same, like similar. So there's, you're not alone in that like pain point. And I think also there's just like also so many resources out there as well right now. So yeah, I don't know if that helps, but
no, I think that's all helpful. It's all good. And Shabbat Shalom, and enjoy the city. And I'm not sure if hopefully I'll see you on this trip, or maybe next time in Tel Aviv.
Yeah. God willing, we'll in quieter times for sure.
Yeah, more peaceful times. All right. All the best. Shabbat Shalom. Enjoy it.
You.
And
Bye, everyone.
send regards to everyone that you see.
We'll do.
All right.
All
Take
right.
care.
Bye,
We'll
everyone.
do the same. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
And
Bye.
appreciate the questions. They're really great.
Yeah. Everyone, it was really great.